Today I'm going to be ranking every Clash Royale card from worst to best. Keep in mind that I'm not talking about the evolution cards, and that I'm talking about each card in terms of the defense, attack, and how it feels when used against you. Remember that everyone is entitled to their opinion, and I'd like to hear yours in the comments. At 118th place we have Bomba. Bomba has been seen as one of the worst cards for quite a long time. Supercell probably forgot about him. The latest buff did nothing to help him. His HP is a joke, so if Supercell wants to revive him, buff his HP. He's seriously too fragile and can be taken out really easily. He can be good against Skeleton Army, but other than that, he is too weak. At 117th, we have Bomb Tower. Bomb Tower is never really seen in game anymore, except for a few rare cases. Bomb Tower is actually good against swarms, plus the recent indirect buff to the Goblin Hut actually promotes spawners, where Bomb Tower is strong against. The biggest problem with the Bomb Tower, however, is the fact that it's heavily outclassed by the Inferno Tower. At 116th, we have Furnace. Only reason Furnace is down here is mostly for the fact that it can easily be defended just from the tower alone. Although it is a great distraction for the Hog Rider and extremely effective against swarms, I still find this card to be on the weaker side of their buildings in Clash Royale. Battle Healer is a card that I rarely see get used in any deck at all. This card doesn't really receive that much value in general, and often I seem to forget that she even exists in the game. The damage she puts out isn't a whole lot, but the heal effect upon the other troops can be very useful for combat. I get that Heal Spirit isn't supposed to do any damage, but even for healing, he isn't really useful at all. I remember Heal being able to save certain troops from dying, but that's just ridiculously rare to see happen with Heal Spirit. Honestly, I just feel that having Heal Spirit in your deck just costs up a space rather than help. It no longer makes sense to use the Barbarian Hut. Barbarians are one of the worst cards. Barbarian Hut spawns Barbarians, which is not threatful at all. Spear Goblins got buffed. It affects the Goblin Hut, making Barb Hut a lot more useless than it originally was. The Goblin Hut for me is a little better than the Barbarian Hut and the Furnace. I say this because the Spear Goblins are better for defense. Not only that, it spawns 3 goblins that could also help out for distractions. In my opinion, the mirror was absolutely ruined by the fact that you need extra elixir to be able to place it. Honestly, I stopped using the mirror in my deck for this purpose alone. It costs too much to use and certain cards can't be mirrored. Just like the Heal Spirit, I generally think that it should just take up space. Clone is just too weak to be a good card. Clone troops can be easily wrecked by tornado or arrows. However, ignore the clone troops and you'll suffer big time. That's why clone isn't ranked too high. Still, it needs a buff. In 109th place, we have the Three Musketeers. Now, the Three Musketeers have been placed here mostly for the fact that it costs way too much to deploy. I will have to say that as an attack mechanism, it can be really useful if placed correctly. As I said while I was talking about the Barbarian Hut, the Barbarians have honestly lost their spark. The regular Barbarians turn out to be too easy to stop, too slow and weak for 5 Elixir. Barbarians are dying off. The Goblin Gang turn out to be better. Now, in my opinion, Barbarians are arguably one of the weakest cards in the game. After Tesla's rework, Cannon became a lot more useless. Cannon had very poor stats, low HP, low damage. Nowadays, Tesla's a much better option thanks to its higher DPS and rework that allow it to one-shot minions. Cannon is also terrible against tanks and swarms. The skeletons do only cost 1 elixir, but they're outclassed by Ice Spirit. And who uses them rather than goblins? They can be great distractions for certain enemies such as the Inferno Dragon, as they will be slowed down for only 1 elixir. Elixir Collector can be quite a good card to be able to farm more elixir, but unfortunately if the opponent has Goblin Barrel or a spell, they can easily take it out. The Suspicious Bush is really weak, and I generally feel that it doesn't really put out a lot, even for attack. It just feels really useless. In my opinion, Elite Barbarians honestly ruined Clash Royale. They do way too much damage, and I can't count how many times I've lost to a deck containing them. Honestly, just a really toxic card. Goblin Cage is a great way to defend against cards that only lock onto buildings, whilst also sending out a goblin that can attack and distract others. Not too bad of a building. Here we have the first champion card that has been added to the rankings of all the cards. I will have to be honest, I prefer to use the Knight, especially now that the Knight got an evolution form. The Void is a viable substitution for the Fireball in certain decks. For 1 less elixir, the Void has the capacity to do 1.5 times the damage of the Fireball with the same radius. However, unlike the Fireball, the Void is much worse against large offensive pushes and deals less damage to the Crown Tower. Tombstone is a great replacement to the Furnace and Barbarian Hut. Constantly spamming skeletons can help out a player offensively and defensively. Why would I use the Archers if I can use the Firecracker for the exact same elixir and can both be easily taken out by arrows or even the Fireball? Now, I honestly don't know why anyone would ever have this thing in their deck. The card is useless, at least in my opinion. Although they did buff the melee damage, it's something that I'll never put in my deck. The Goblin Demolisher is another example of a card where I feel that it wasn't really a necessary addition to the game. The Expo has honestly been extremely broken for the longest while. The Expo can easily be countered by any other card and honestly has just lost a lot of value. The Executioner's long range ability to hit air troops and area damage can allow him to fulfill similar defensive roles to a wizard or a witch. Although Executioner's range is 4.5 tiles, his axe throw has a range of 7.5 tiles. The Royal Giant is a great counter to siege buildings such as the Expo and Mortar, since he has decent range, high health, and only targets buildings. Phoenix may not be the best card, but it is still one of the most annoying. It fits easily into most decks as a powerful defense and doesn't rely on its rebirth to earn its cost in Elixir. The good thing about Rascals is that you can use them to bait a lot of spells such as the Log and still be able to cause some decent damage. Lava Hound has a whopping 3581 HP at tournament levels, but deals minimal damage. After he is knocked out, smaller minions spawn in. It's another card that I don't see get used so often. The Elixir Golem is great at damaging buildings, but the main downside to him is the fact that the enemy player will receive Elixir for every time he gets destroyed. Honestly, to me, it just seems like more of an advantage for the opponent. Honestly, I just don't understand how she is meant to be used. Most decks I have seen don't usually work too well with this card being added. If I had to give an award for Clash Royale's most toxic card, it would definitely be for the Tornado. The Tornado can easily pull in troops to attack the King Tower earlier and instantly kill skeleton armies. Fire Spirit does enough damage to fully counter wall breakers placed in one lane, and it also kills goblins, making it better for dealing with drill than any other spirit. The shield that the guards carry can get taken out pretty easily, leaving them vulnerable. If it wasn't for this fight, the guards would be ranked a little lower down. Although the fly machine deals quite a fair bit of damage, I feel that the health should be increased at least by a small percentage. Royal Delivery can hit air, deal more damage in a larger area, knock back light troops, and spawn a better defender at the end. This is extremely useful on the side of defense, but unfortunately it won't completely stop troops who only target buildings. Goblin Curse is extremely useful if the enemy deploys a skeleton army, otherwise the card is deemed to be a little useless. If used on a Skarmy, it can completely demolish one of the towers. The Goblin Drill is very powerful on defense, being able to directly reach crown towers with unrestricted deployment range, and will quickly spawn goblins which deal high damage while tanking for them. Once the Goblin Drill is destroyed, even more goblins will spawn and tank for each other. The Electro Giant synergizes well with Tornado. This is handy for ranged troops that stay outside the zap area that can be pulled in to stun the troops. He also costs 7 elixir, so use at your own risk. The Sparky has the highest damage of all troops with area damage, with 1936 damage per hit at level 15. If Sparky locks onto your tower, it's GG's. Personally, I have never enjoyed playing against any user who has Golem in their deck. It's the most expensive card in the game, but it can feel a little overpowered at times. With its cheaper cost, ability to deal area damage, and its dead zone, the mortar can be used as a cheaper, more versatile, and less risky alternative to the X-Bow. Little Prince honestly has a great attack mechanism, but I honestly hate having to hear the sound of his voice. It is so enraging. It's a good card above average, but you can kill relatively easily, so no one really has major issues with it. I don't think it's found its deck, however. The Mother Witch is a perfect counter to Graveyard, as not only will she help the tower take down the skeletons, but she will curse a lot of skeletons, translating defense into potentially massive counterattack. It's a good card for clearing away small units one by one so that the rest of a push can follow. The cannon card is difficult to redirect due to its long range and its immunity to knockback. Since the Earthquake causes a massive amount of damage to buildings, it is a good card for clearing any defenses that may be used against you and finishing off any towers on low HP. Zappies can be very effective against low hit speed troops such as the Hunter and Bowler, however when you are against the Zappies it can be so annoying. The Mighty Miner alongside the Inferno Dragon are the only two troops in the game that do build up damage to anything. He is also able to drop a bomb and move to the opposite side of the arena. He is at least viable in P.E.K.K.A Bridge spam. There are many cards that are not used in any deck. He is pretty good, but nothing more than average. Ice Golem can be a great way to distract oncoming foes and freeze them in their tracks. You may also place the Ice Golem in front of the Hog for some added effects. Bandit is really good at countering certain cards such as the Prince and Mega Knight, but something makes me feel that this card is a little underpowered, at least for the time being. Skeleton Barrel is one of the best air common cards in Clash Royale, which can be used to attack opposing buildings and towers. Since the skeleton dragons come in a pair, they can defeat minions quickly and will usually be able to counter them and minion hordes if given enough distance to attack. The Night Witch's high damage per attack in addition to her continuous spawns make her potent at defeating high hit point units, whether it be on offense or defense. The Fisherman has to be one of the best defensive cards in the game, countering a wide array of cards for just 3 elixir. Honestly, it really feels like she's just unfair in how much damage she does. The Musketeer is great for defense, eliminating any foe in just a few hits. Tesla's damage is fine. With Tau it can solo a Hog, which is the big deal. The point of Tesla isn't that it does a lot of damage or is tanky. The Battle Ram is your main push card and is only effective when paired up with something else. After the Ram has been used, two Barbarians will be able to help out offensively. Zap stuns slash resets, faster deploy, also rage despite having a larger radius probably requires a bit more time to aim. As one of the most potent damage dealing spells in Clash Royale, Lightning strikes quickly and can obliterate key troops and buildings. Players were eager to show just how much power this card carries, not just in terms of raw damage but also in its psychological impact. She is mostly great if she pairs with Rune Giant, besides that she feels too weak most of the time compared to other 2 Elixir cards. Poison is one of the more efficient methods at dealing with buildings that spawn troops, as the spell will not only reduce the building's lifetime but also damage down the oncoming spawned units. Skeleton King honestly needs a buff, otherwise it would have been further down the list. He wields a mace, yet he can't one-shot goblins. Definitely a really good card for getting huge amounts of damage when deployed on either side of the bridges. His range is just about right to make him a very good card to use. The Royal Recruits are a high potential card in the game, capable of applying pressure across dual lanes and offering a strong presence both offensively and defensively. This is especially useful against high damage troops that can survive the spell, such as an Executioner. In overtime, a Fireball can be used to quickly take out an enemy tower and secure a win if the enemy's tower has low enough health. Despite dealing low area damage, the Ice Wizard is capable of quickly clearing fragile swarms, such as the Skeleton Army and Bats. The Monk, in my opinion, is one of the best champions in the game. He is able to reflect projectiles and damage right back onto the enemies. Wall breakers are especially effective in decks with several low cost cards. This allows the player to distract the defending troops while rushing straight to one of the towers. Goblin Gang is much better both on offense and counter push, while Skami is better as an underleveled defense option. Due to her splash damage and long range, Princess is a strong support or siege unit. However, she does moderate damage, which coupled with her very slow attack rate makes her a weak solo counter to anything but swarms. The log is the best defense against large swarms and the goblin barrel in specific, though now that log baits are a thing, a player has to try and not use the log at the wrong times. The shrapnel is what makes the firecracker so effective, especially against swarms or units lined up behind a tank. I'm pretty sure everyone except me has this card in their deck. The Dark Goblin is a very effective counter to spawner buildings, particularly the Furnace. He can snipe the Furnace if placed 4 tiles away. His Evo makes him even better, but more on that later. Giant Skeleton is a card that finds a fair bit of play in early and mid arenas. The card is supposed to be a defense card, but most players use it as an attack, as when you kill him, he drops a bomb. Lumberjack's Rage drop after he dies is very useful, but without another card on attack, such as the Balloon or Hog Rider, it isn't as useful. Arrows are extremely effective against large swarms of low health troops such as the Minion Horde, Skeleton Army, Bats, or Goblin Gang. With proper timing, the Giant Snowball can also be an effective support on offense, destroying low hit point troops and knocking back and slowing down other incoming troops. Minions are effective when countering ground troops, and are not as risky to use as Minion Horde due to their lower cost. Archer Queen is really useful, especially at defense. Being able to turn invisible and rapid firing at enemy troops is a great way to stop an offensive push. If well placed on defense, he can be any card around 5 elixir and counterattack, forcing the opponent to have to defend. Goblins are a cheap way to deal high damage to building targeting troops such as the Giant or Hog Rider, though they will rarely be able to fully counter these troops. Mega Minion does decent damage on tanks and can take quite a few punches. It's better than Minions in my opinion. Ram Rider is very viable on defense, given the situation. She can almost completely immobilize single troops such as the Golem or Mini P.E.K.K.A. Bats are great for aerial defense. They cost only 2 elixir to deploy, which makes them an inexpensive option for defending against more costly enemy attacks. The Minion Horde is a high risk, high reward card. It is a powerful defensive card and can easily be turned into a threatening counter push. The cannon can also be a great cheap distraction for dangerous troops like the Prince and the Balloon. It is best used against tanks. For just 1 elixir, the Electro Spirit is a strong card to have in many decks due to its ability to cycle the deck, and to give other troops or even the Crown Tower more time to destroy an oncoming threat. The Hunter in Clash Royale is a strong card that can be used on both attack and defense due to its tremendous burst damage at close range. The Barbarian Barrel is a great counter to the skeletons from the Skeleton Barrel since its death damage does not deal too much damage. I honestly find it quite cool how the Giant attacks buildings and the Spear Goblin throws spears at aerial and ground troops also. Spear Goblins are decent support behind higher hit point troops such as the Giant. They can deal considerable damage to defending units and buildings. The Royal Hogs are excellent rush units at the start of the game due to their fast movement speed and ability to jump over the river. Royal Hogs work very well in 3 Musketeer decks. The Prince is a rather expensive mini-tank. The charge was what made it worth investing into over a mini P.E.K.K.A. or Knight. The catch being you had to be mindful. In the earlier stages, I can definitely see more players using the Giant than in the later stages due to the fact that it is one of the starting cards. The Miner will tank the damage from the tower or other troops while the supporting units deal massive damage. This can be countered by swarm troops or spells, however. I can't express how much I hate this card being used against me. Still, it is an amazing card for stopping troops in their tracks. The wizard's high damage per second and decent hit speed in addition to his ranged area damage makes him effective at supporting high hit point tanks. Freeze has a lot of value, but it can still be a really toxic card. I used to use the combo of Balloon plus Freeze, which in my case would work out pretty good. Knight would have been placed even lower if it wasn't for the fact that his movement and attacks are extremely slow. Ice Spirit is a great way to fend off and stop hordes of enemies while also slowing down tanks and other attacks that are sent directly to your towers. Hog Rider is a card that is seen in so many decks, and honestly, with the correct combos, you could definitely do some good damage off the enemy towers. Unlike most support troops, the bowler has fair higher health and a knockback effect. This means that the bowler cannot be countered by most mini tanks such as the Knight. He is also spell resistant, able to survive an equal level rocket. These factors make him a powerful support troop. Defensively, the Valkyrie is generally most effective when played reactively. Instead of dropping her preemptively against a push, it is better to wait for the support troops to cross the bridge so that you can gain a defensive boost. Graveyard is great on both defense and attack, being able to spawn skeletons right under the opponent's tower. Electro Dragon is pretty strong at stopping Inferno Dragons. Unfortunately, to really get an effect from this card, you would rather use its evolution, which I'll talk about later on in the video. Rocket to me is the best projectile that can be launched at the enemy player. The damage it puts out is definitely worth the bonus elixir that it costs. Skeleton Army is the best defense that can completely override massive tanks such as the P.E.K.K.A. Giant Skeleton. The Witch is fairly tanky. Not a mini tank, no, but she can withstand a significant amount of damage before going down. Her raw starts aren't that bad. Inferno Tower, in my opinion, is the best way to counter a large tank that is coming directly for your tower. Rage deals placement damage to kill skeletons and bats. You can rage up your own units for super defense. It can enhance any push for just 2 elixir. Unfortunately, just the baby dragon on its own isn't too good as it can be countered easily, but with another card, it's really good on offense. His main defensive potential comes from his very high health and his spawn and jump damage obliterating support troops and glass cannons. The Inferno Dragon can be considered a better alternative for the Inferno Tower due to its lower cost and ability to counterattack. The balloon is honestly my go-to instead of the Hog Rider. I have always had the balloon in my deck and like that it shall stay for years to come. Mini P.E.K.K.A. once fully upgraded is an absolute legend of a card. It's a card that ever since I got it I never took it out from my deck or replaced it for anything else. P.E.K.K.A. is honestly just the most goated card in the game. It works great as an attack card and it's just my favorite in the game all around. And now with that being said, I will be ranking all of the evolution cards. After so many updates to the Tesla, I can't really say that it is the best, and not just the evolution, the normal one as well. The Evo itself doesn't provide a whole lot of value to the card. And 28th, we have the Royal Giant Evolution. Whilst I feel that the damage around him is very useful against Skarmy and knocking back certain group troops, it just costs way too much to use, which would then make it very difficult for different players. The Giant Snowball evolution doesn't really add any other value to the Snowball except for some more movement. Unfortunately, the knockback effect is completely removed from the Snowball during the evolution. While the archers are usually quite good at attacking, they still get one shot very easily by arrows or even the fireball. I honestly believe that using the firecracker or even the musketeer will probably help you out more than having the archers. Like I said in my previous rankings of the normal cards, the bomber is probably the most useless card in the game except against swarms. Although this time he is not at the bottom of the list, as when he uses evolution the bomb will bounce twice, meaning he will damage even more enemies down the lanes. Once again, I still feel that the barbarians have become more useless as the years have gone by. Evo barbarians I feel still cost too much for what they put out, so I would honestly replace them for other cards in the game. The Battle Ram Evo can be quite useful as it will moderately damage any enemies as it rams. I still feel that it's still quite an easy card to defend against, even so if buildings are used against it. I still have to admit that if the Battle Ram connects to the tower, it will cause quite a lot of damage. The Goblin Cage is fairly strong and useful, especially if it's able to snatch up a P.E.K.K.A. Unfortunately, it can be easily destroyed by aerial units, which heavily affect the usability of the Goblin Cage. It's also a card that has not seen a lot in decks. The Goblin Drill evolution is nothing special. It will respawn in a different location and spawn goblins. Unfortunately, it doesn't add much to the game, and therefore I would honestly just not use it. I genuinely feel that the Zap evolution works pretty well in some decks. It is great to slow down multiple enemies that could be defending your attacks. Decks that use Zap evolution are usually pretty strong, but I feel that there are other evolutions that would work better for me. Now, the usage rate for the recruits is actually much lower than I expected. I understand that the higher level players will be able to defend against the recruits quite easily. Evo Musketeers can be useful sometimes like sniping support troops and buildings, but not too much. Musketeer on her own is pretty solid, but overall, the evolution kinda sucks. Wallbreakers are pretty good Evos in my opinion because they are cheap and very tough to defend. You could just use them to cycle at bridge and they will almost always connect to at least one tower. That is, if they aren't already defended by another building. The Mortar Evo may seem overpowered by looking at it and its stats, but it's actually quite easy to counter. This card was a little overhyped when it originally came out by YouTubers and the Clash Royale community. The evolved bats is a much better counter to Skeleton Barrel than the regular bats, due to their ability to take the Skeleton Barrel's death damage while still being able to take out the skeletons that come out of it. The balloon's death damage cannot take out the evolved bats if they're at their maximum hit points. The only problem with the Ice Spirit is that the original number of stuns was changed from 3 to 2, although he can be very useful at slowing down units for the Inferno Tower and Inferno Dragon. The evolved Firecracker is incredibly strong on defense due to her increased shrapnel damage from the sparks. This can be really good at combating against large waves of enemies such as the Barbarians. Evo Dark Goblin is a cheap cycle card that goes well in all sorts of decks, and while the Evo effect takes a bit of time to ramp up, in some situations Evo Dark Goblin can significantly boost your offensive and defensive power in the game. The Electro Dragon still continues to be quite an overpowered card in the game. The evolution even more has his electric attack was spread across several troops, making the Evo 10 times more useful for defensive purposes. Lumberjack usually isn't very good on his own unless it is supported by another card such as the Balloon. The evolution makes him more useful as he can spawn on towers and damage defenses while being completely invisible and invincible. Although his damage has been nerfed in recent updates, I still think that he is really useful. The Knight evolution is actually very useful, especially with a shield that reduces any damage by 60%. If placed correctly, it can be an amazing card, especially if it connects with the tower. The evolved Goblin Giant is great on offense from his ability to quickly stack up massive amounts of goblins at 50% hit points, while its high hit points and spear goblins tank for support troops and damage opposing defenses. Evo Goblin Barrel can be really good against log players, tricking them into only being able to defend against one side, although the decoy goblins have lower health than the normal goblins. The Valkyrie being able to pull in multiple targets honestly just makes her 100 times better. Pulling in waves of skeleton armies and eliminating them all at once is really useful. Evo Valkyrie can also be really good in slowing down troops that are attacking. Evo skeletons can be really powerful if they are used correctly. I would say though they are much better for defense as they can completely overpower cards like the Mini P.E.K.K.A, and Giant Skeleton. The duplication after every hit makes them really cool. Cannon evolution is heavily used, especially for the higher level players. The 9 bombs that are sent across the map when deployed makes Evo Cannon one of the best to use. It can take out attack and even defense troops. Of course, to use the Evo Cannon, you have to wait through 2 cycles or it would be way too strong. Evo Wizard with his shield is honestly really good at defense, especially if large swarms are sent for attack. Knocking back the enemy is the cherry on the top if you're fending off multiple troops attacking. As I said before, the Mega Knight continues to be one of the strongest cards in the game. The evolution makes him 10 times more OP as he can send certain enemy ground troops flying really far. It's fun when you are the one that is using him, because when the tables turn it doesn't feel good. P.E.K.K.A alone is the best card in the game. Now unfortunately the P.E.K.K.A is going to already has a range nerf, making Evo P.E.K.K.A a little less powerful. I still think that it's the best card in the game by far.